Hey guys, tonight we're travelling to a time of tumbleweeds, 10-gallon hats, and absolutely no idea what flirting was supposed to look like. That's right, we're heading to the Wild West. A place where courtship was more like a grim negotiation between dust-covered strangers than anything resembling romance. If you think dating apps are bad now, just wait until you meet a guy named Buck, who proposes using a dead rattlesnake as a bouquet. So before we saddle up, take a second to like the video and subscribe if this kind of weird, historical insomnia fuel is your thing. And let me know in the comments what time it is for you, and where you're tuning in from. Always fun to see which time zones are trying to fall asleep to awkward frontier affection. Now dim the lights, maybe throw on a fan, or imagine the gentle creak of a rocking chair on a weathered wooden porch. Let's drift back to a time when love letters were written with chicken feathers, deodorant was a rumour, and "he has land" was the hottest pickup line in town. Congratulations, you've just time travelled to the year 1871. The good news? You're single. The bad news? You're very single. And you're in the American frontier, which is basically a long dirt tantrum stretched between two oceans. Welcome to the Wild West, where the idea of romance exists mostly in saloon ballads and the fever dreams of lonely ranch hands. You don't remember falling asleep. You certainly didn't ask to be transported into the body of a 19th century drifter wearing someone else's dusty boots. But here you are, blinking against the morning sun, squinting through a hangover made of dust, beef jerky, and emotional repression. There's no dating profile, no likes, hiking, and long walks on the beach. There's just your name, or at least what people yell at you when you spill your whiskey, and a vague memory of being challenged to a duel by someone who claimed you winked at their cousin. Your first identity in a strange new world, unattached. That's a problem. See, being single in the Wild West isn't quirky or independent, it's suspicious. If you're a man without a wife, you're either a drifter, a con artist, or just terrible at not dying alone. If you're a woman without a husband, people assume you're either widowed, cursed, or running from something. Possibly the law, possibly an overdue pie recipe. There is no in-between. The frontier is not kind to nuance. You check your reflection in a cracked mirror behind a saloon bar and immediately regret it. Your face is somehow both sunburnt and wind-chapped. Your hair looks like it was styled by a blind horse using a cactus. And your eyes, wide, confused, and already contemplating the bleak prospect of frontier courtship. This is not the face of someone about to be swept off their feet. This is the face of someone who's about to get rejected by a woman chewing tobacco with better posture than you. There's no time for identity crises, though. You're in Dodge City, population questionable. You've got a bedroll, a pair of boots that used to belong to someone else, and a suspicious letter in your coat pocket addressed to a Miss Caroline Whitmore, care of the Red Dog Boarding House. Well, you don't remember writing it. It smells like whiskey and desperation. You step out into the main street. Dirt, horses, and judgment greet you immediately. It's not even noon, and you've already been side-eyed by two gamblers, a preacher, and what you think might be a chicken wearing a tiny hat. Everyone here has a story, but none of them are romantic. The closest thing to a love story is a cattle auction with extra eye contact. Your identity, for all its ambiguity, comes with immediate If you're a man, you're expected to take a wife. Not because of affection or compatibility, but because the local economy depends on you producing small, dirty children to work the land and die of tetanus. If you're a woman, congratulations. You're outnumbered 6-1, and every eye follows you like you're the last sandwich at a mining camp. People treat your mere existence like it's a marriage proposal. Gender ratios in the Wild West are less balanced and more catastrophic. In many frontier towns, men outnumber women by insane margins. Think 10-1, sometimes higher. A woman stepping off a stagecoach was less a traveller and more an event. Entire towns would pause. People would whisper. Saloons would fall silent, and someone would inevitably yell, "She's got both her teeth!" like it was a miracle from God himself. That kind of attention might sound flattering. It's not. It's exhausting, predatory, and deeply unromantic. Women became instant commodities, desired, yes, but not understood. Every conversation came with subtext. Every glance was measured. And every compliment felt like it had marriage papers stapled to the back. You couldn't just say hello. You had to declare intentions, display a moral character, and explain why you only had 3 goats instead of the expected 5. If you're a man, you're also expected to propose, often before you've even had a full conversation. Courtship on the frontier is not slow, sweet, or candlelit. It's a hurried transaction built around survival. You don't ask about her favourite colour. You ask how many chickens she can pluck in an hour, and whether she knows how to shoot at coyotes from a moving wagon. People don't date, they acquire. But don't get too full of yourself. Just because you're single doesn't mean you're eligible. Frontier dating isn't about your charm or your dance skills. It's about what you can offer. Land, livestock, literacy, preferably 2 out of 3. Women didn't marry for love, they married for less risk. Is he mean but owns a barn? Good enough. Is he cleanish and unlikely to die in a bar fight? Jackpot. And the wildest part? People married strangers all the time. You could exchange 3 letters, maybe a grainy photograph where no one is smiling, and suddenly you're betrothed to someone you've never met, who might not even be their own handwriting. Mail order brides weren't a trope. They were reality. Desperate men placed ads in newspapers begging for wives. Women answered with hopeful lies and vague promises of domestic bliss, which usually meant they had working knees and a cast iron skillet. If you're a woman and you step off that train, you're already engaged, you just don't know it yet. 5 men are planning how to impress you with their homemade jerky. 3 are preparing to propose via awkward stammering. 1 has written a poem, and it's terrible. And 1, probably the richest one, is just waiting to see if you can cook without crying. For men, desperation is sweaty and loud. For women, it's silent and dangerous. If you reject too many suitors, you're labelled uppity. If you accept the wrong one, you might end up married to a guy who thinks bathing is for city folk and spend most of his free time spitting into a bucket and judging clouds. Your identity, in short, isn't really yours. It's projected onto you by the dust-covered strangers who assume your presence means availability. And the only way to escape it is to marry, disappear, or invent a fake name and join a travelling medicine show. But for now, you're still single. And in the Wild West, that's not a lifestyle. It's a liability. You try to walk like you belong here. Confident, relaxed, the way cowboys do in movies. But your boots squeak, your belt is loose, and your attempt at a swagger just looks like you sat on a cactus. People notice. They always notice. You pass a couple of women in high-necked dresses hauling water buckets and exchanging looks that say, "Another one?" You're not the first outsider to roll into town looking like they're about to ask where the closest dating app is. And they know you won't last a week. You stop at the general store, partly for supplies, partly because you need to understand how anything in this world functions. The shopkeeper is chewing on something that's probably tobacco, possibly bark. He eyes you without smiling. You're a stranger, a loner, single, which means you're suspicious and potentially dangerous, or worse, a poet. He asks if you're here to settle down. You freeze. What does that even mean here? Get a job? Buy land? Marry the first available woman with a working kidney? You mumble something about maybe, and he nods slowly, like he's already planning to introduce you to his niece, who's probably 12, owns a shotgun, and has already outlived 3 husbands. The truth is, in the Wild West, settling down doesn't mean building a white picket fence and adopting a golden retriever. It means anchoring yourself to a community made of splinters, secrets, and dust. And if you're a single adult, you are incomplete, socially, morally, and economically. You're expected to become part of the machinery, work, wed, reproduce, repeat. There is no room for ambiguity. You're either available or you're married, and being in between makes people twitchy. You wander out, your mind spinning with the realization that your modern concept of dating, getting to know someone, testing compatibility, exchanging Spotify playlists, would get you laughed out of town or tied to a fence post. In the frontier, time is scarce, people die young, and compatibility is measured in goats. There's no flirting here, at least not like you know it. A compliment is considered forward. 2 compliments is a proposal. If you so much as smile at someone for too long, you'll either be engaged by sundown or shot by her brother. That doesn't mean people aren't trying. The Wild West is still full of people, lonely, broken, hopeful people who long for connection. But that connection gets twisted through layers of survival, pride, and proximity. You don't fall in love, you fall into obligation. And that's if you're lucky. Let's say you're a woman. You ride into town wearing a bonnet, a long skirt, and the kind of exhaustion that only comes from existing in a world designed to ignore you unless you're married or dying. The second your foot hits the ground, men are watching. Not admiring, assessing. You're evaluated like livestock. Posture, age, sturdiness, teeth. A romantic gesture is someone offering you half of their boiled potatoes and a slightly cleaner saddle. If you're pretty, it's a problem. If you're plain, it's still a problem. Too outspoken, dangerous. Too quiet, suspicious. Too educated, threatening. Too poor, expected. Too rich, a trap. There's no winning. Every trait can be twisted into something undesirable by a man with insecurities and a gun. And marriage is not always a choice. In many towns, the pressure is immense. Social contracts are made without your input. If a respected man takes an interest, you're expected to say yes. If you say no, people start whispering, then judging, then acting. Marriage is security. It's survival. It's the only socially acceptable way for a woman to exist past the age of 16 without becoming someone's cautionary tale. And love? Love is optional, not required. Often inconvenient. It makes things messy. That's why mail order brides became a thing. Women from the East, usually desperate, widowed, or just bored of Boston, answered ads from lonely cowhands and ex-soldiers living in shacks surrounded by rattlesnakes and emotional damage. The letters were dramatic, pitiful, occasionally charming. They promise safety, land, sometimes love. But most of all, they promised purpose, something a woman couldn't always get back home. And they came, by the trainload. They arrived with their bags and their hopes and their mild cholera, and they stepped into lives that smelled like unwashed denim and despair. Some found happiness. Most found work. A few found headstones. For men, it wasn't easier. A single man in the Wild West was seen as both a threat and a failure. You're either hiding something, or you've been rejected so many times even the goats avoid you. The pressure to find a good woman was immense. You needed her to cook, clean, bear children, and absorb your moods. It wasn't about love. It was about logistics. A man with a wife was respectable. A man without one was suspect. But finding a wife wasn't easy when the local dating pool consisted of one widow, a preacher's daughter, and a woman who only answered to Mad Maud and might be married to a ghost. If you were desperate, and most were, you'd ride into the next town over just to meet someone new. That's a 30-mile ride for the possibility of small talk. You might end up at a barn dance, the frontier's closest thing to speed dating. Picture this: dim lighting from oil lamps, the smell of sweat and pickles, music from a fiddle missing 2 strings, and couples stomping around on creaky floorboards while eyeing each other like they're appraising livestock. Everyone is pretending not to be desperate. Everyone is failing. You try to approach someone, you tip your hat, try a smile. She looks you up and down like she's doing math. Can he shoot? Can he plough? Will he die before winter? Is that smell permanent? She says maybe. That's basically a yes. You're in. And that's where the trouble begins. Because dating, even the limited, awkward kind allowed here, comes with consequences. Everyone's watching. Gossip travels faster than horses. If you walk a woman home and she smiles too much, people talk. If you walk her home and she doesn't smile at all, they talk louder. You're never just courting her. You're courting the town. And if you're caught alone with someone too many times, people assume the worst. Or hope for it. You might be pressured into proposing just to protect her reputation, or yours, or the town's fragile sense of moral structure. You're not just deciding if you like someone, you're deciding if you want to share a bed, a farm, a shovel, and a gravesite. The stakes are always high, and yet the loneliness is worse. Because behind all the awkward glances, the accidental proposals, the passive-aggressive casseroles delivered with veiled threats of marriage, people are aching. There's a raw, desperate hunger for companionship beneath all the dirt and shame. You see it in the way people linger in conversation, in how a man carefully irons his one shirt for Sunday service, in how a woman adds ribbons to her hat, hoping someone will notice. This isn't a place for dreamers, but people still dream, quietly, painfully. They dream of laughter and touch, and not eating beans alone by a dying fire for the rest of their lives. They dream of someone knowing their name, not because they owe taxes or stole a mule, but because they matter. And that's the tragedy of identity out here. You're reduced to what you can offer, what you own, how hard you work, and how long you can survive. But deep down, people still want to be seen as people, not functions, not wife material, not provider, just human. But in the Wild West, that's too dangerous. It's easier to pretend, easier to grit your teeth, nod politely, and settle for someone who won't steal your socks or your horse. You try to carve out a place for yourself, but identity out here is slippery. People don't ask who you are. They ask where you're from, what you own, how many head of cattle you can manage without sobbing. The idea of personality takes a back seat to practical concerns like weatherproofing your barn or surviving dysentery. Nobody cares about your opinions on music or how you like your eggs. They care whether you have access to clean water and if you can shoot straight. And if you can't shoot straight, you'd better be able to cook like an angel or clean like your soul depends on it. There's a term that floats around frontier towns like a curse: marriageable. It sounds polite. It's not. It means you've been assessed, weighed, judged. It means your uterus has been stamped with potential, and your hands have the right balance of calluses and gentleness. For men, it means your land hasn't failed yet. Your beard doesn't hide vermin, and your eyes don't scream abandonment issues with a drinking problem. It's the closest thing this world has to a dating profile, except it's filled out by strangers without your consent. You meet someone who seems different, not better, just different. She can read. He smells like he bathed this week. Maybe there's a spark, a half smile across the fire, a shared joke about how awful the beans are tonight. But you don't act on it. You can't act on it. Because courtship here isn't spontaneous. It's tactical. Romantic impulse is a luxury reserved for people who won't be trampled by oxen tomorrow. So you wait. You circle. You talk in that stiff, indirect way people do when everything depends on nothing happening too quickly. You find excuses to walk by their house. You help chop wood no one asked you to. You bring a pie you didn't bake. And eventually, someone else, bolder, richer, or just more assertive, shows up with a cow and a preacher. And that's that. Opportunity missed. Not because you didn't care, but because you cared too carefully. The frontier doesn't reward subtlety. It eats it. You might try again. You might write a letter. A real, handwritten, ink-smudged attempt at sincerity. You sit by candlelight, hunched over a warped desk, trying to express feelings using language stolen from funeral sermons and newspaper ads. You're not poetic. You're just lonely. You seal it with wax and hope it arrives before she marries a man named Otis, who once killed a bobcat with a soup ladle. Sometimes it works. The letter reaches her. She writes back. It's stiff, formal, but there's a hint of curiosity. A maybe. Maybe leads to a meeting. A walk. A discussion about soil and God, and how many siblings you lost to things no one names anymore. And for a second, just 1 second, you feel like you exist. Not just as a worker, or a widow, or a replacement for someone braver, but as yourself. Whoever that even is anymore. Then her father asks what you earn. And it's over. Because identity out here isn't defined by love or honesty. It's defined by your usefulness. What you can do, what you can provide, and how long you'll last before being buried behind the church with a misspelled headstone and a chipped cup full of forget-me-nots. No one remembers placing. Let's say you do marry. Maybe it's arranged. Maybe it's practical. Maybe you got lucky and found someone who laughs at your terrible jokes and doesn't mind the limp. Suddenly, your identity shifts again. You're no longer single. You're settled. Which means everyone relaxes a little. You're now allowed to exist without scrutiny, without whispers. But that relief comes with a new weight, expectation. You're expected to be strong, stoic, endlessly capable. You can't be tender. You can't be unsure. If you're a woman, you must now produce children on a schedule. If you're a man, you must now protect, provide, and pretend you're not slowly falling apart under the pressure of endless drought and disappointment. You don't just become a partner, you become a role: wife, husband, mother, provider. The person you were, or might have been, gets buried under chores and childbirth, and the kind of silence that settles in after your third stillbirth, or your fifth failed harvest. And heaven help you if you're not straight. If you don't fit neatly into the expectations this world demands, there's no room for other kinds of love, no safety in ambiguity. If your heart strays outside the tightly scripted narrative of man and wife, people don't just stare, they sharpen things, they whisper with pitchforks. So you hide, or you leave, or you marry anyway and carry that secret like a stone in your boot until it blisters. No one asks who you love, they ask who you'll marry, and if you don't, you disappear. Quietly, permanently. The West does not do nuance, it barely does forgiveness. Even for the conforming, identity is performative. The woman who keeps her head down and bakes the biscuits, the man who builds the fence and never cries. Everyone becomes a version of what they're expected to be, because survival demands it. There's no room for doubt, no margin for softness. Love becomes a whispered luxury, spoken after dark, behind closed doors, when the rest of the world can't see you needing something. And that's the quiet truth of frontier life. Everyone's pretending. Pretending they're stronger than they are. Pretending they're happy with the match they made. Pretending they don't miss something they can't even name. They walk through their days with calloused hands and guarded hearts, and they tell themselves this is how it's supposed to be. That love is a risk not worth taking. That marriage is the end goal, even if the ending isn't happy. That loneliness is just part of the landscape, like the dust and the drought and the coyotes that howl through the night like they know everyone's secrets. And yet, they hope, quietly, desperately, illogically. Hope is stubborn like that, even in the worst places, especially in the worst places. You'll see it in the way someone saves a wildflower in a tin cup, in the awkward smiles shared during Sunday service, in the ridiculous hat a man wears just to make a girl laugh. People ache for connection, even when the odds are terrible, even when they know it won't end well. Maybe that's the truest part of this whole grim picture, that in a world designed to grind people into the dirt, someone still sings a song by firelight. Someone still writes a love letter they'll never send. Someone still dreams. And maybe, just maybe, someone still falls in love, not because it's safe or smart or part of the plan, but because even the Wild West can't kill off hope completely. It just makes you fight for it. So here you are, a stranger in a strange time. Single, unsure, probably underfed. Your identity shifting with every dusty footstep you take. But something inside you stirs. Not comfort, not confidence, just curiosity. A whisper of a question. What if, in spite of everything you tried, what if you reached out, stumbled through the awkward silences, risked rejection, and dared, even once, to be more than just what this place demands? What if love, real love, could exist here? Somewhere beneath the grit and the gunpowder and the ghost of who you used to be. It's foolish, impossible, romantic. And for just a moment, that's enough. You adjust your hat, wipe the dust from your sleeves, and take one step forward. Because maybe, just maybe, your story isn't over yet, Uri. You live in a box. That's the first thing to understand. It's not a metaphor. It's not poetic. You live in a literal box. 4 walls of warped wood, a dirt floor, a roof that leaks when the wind shifts wrong, and exactly one window so small it doubles as a ventilation system and a squirrel door. There's no insulation, no privacy, no scent control, just space enough for a bed made of straw, a stove that wheezes like it regrets its existence, and maybe, if you're really doing well, a rocking chair that doesn't try to throw you like an untrained mule. You wake up to the sound of boots on the porch. Not your porch. You don't have a porch. But someone's. You're not alone. You're never alone. Even if you're living by yourself, the walls are thin, and everything echoes. Laughter, gossip, arguing, snoring, praying, screaming, all of it floats through the town like smoke from a bad fire. You hear the world whether you want to or not. There's no such thing as quiet in the Wild West. Just layers of noise stacked on top of one another until your ears give up and your brain decides it's background music. Your existence is not peaceful. It's tolerated. You step outside. The street is mud, mostly. Sometimes it's dust. Sometimes both. A thrilling combination of sticky and choking. You walk carefully, not because you're graceful, but because every step could land you in a fresh pile of horse offerings, or the remnants of someone's spilled chamber pot. There's no sanitation, no city planning, just a vague understanding that over there is where people relieve themselves, and over here is where children play. And sometimes those two ideas overlap in ways no one wants to talk about. The air smells like ambition, failure and livestock. That sounds dramatic. It's not. There's a reason no one describes the Wild West as fragrant. Every breath is a gamble. You might catch a whiff of bread baking, if someone's feeling domestic, but it's quickly swallowed by the smell of manure, unwashed humanity, old whiskey, and whatever died behind the blacksmith shop last week, and hasn't been moved because no one wants to touch it. This is your dating environment. This is where romance is supposed to happen. Imagine trying to impress someone while swatting flies away from your face and wiping mud off your one clean shirt with a rag that already smells like bacon grease and regret. Imagine trying to flirt while your socks squish audibly from stepping in something you hope was just water. Imagine trying to make eye contact with someone when your eyelids are crusted with trail dust and your breath smells like jerky left in the sun. Welcome to the ambient reality of courtship. Let's say you go for a walk, not because it's romantic, but because sitting still for too long makes the fleas notice you more. There are no parks, no cafes, no quiet corners where you can sit and share secrets. The town has a church, a saloon, a jail, and maybe a general store. That's it. Those are your date night options. Penitence, alcohol, incarceration, or bartering for beans. Pick one. If you're lucky, there's a dance hall. Not a ballroom. Not a social club. A dance hall. A big room with warped floorboards, a piano missing half its keys, and the kind of lighting that makes everyone look equally exhausted. This is where people gather when they're trying to pretend life isn't constantly trying to kill them. You might dance. You might drink. You might awkwardly nod at someone across the room and hope that counts as chemistry. But be careful. Touch someone too long and the preacher gets involved. Touch someone too little and their father gets involved. There is no middle ground. Just judgment and the sound of boots tapping out existential dread on a pinewood floor. If you're a woman, the environment is even smaller. Your world exists in pieces. The kitchen, the well, the church pew, the boarding house. You can't just walk around without people staring. You can't visit the saloon, not unless you want a reputation and a new career path you didn't ask for. Every movement is monitored. Every glance is noted. Every step outside your routine is interpreted as a signal, and signals are dangerous. You might go sit on your front stoop just to breathe. Within minutes, someone's asked if you're expecting company. You're not. But now you are, because expectation has already written its script. You become the object of someone's narrative, whether you like it or not. And that narrative usually ends with a ring, a crib, and you asking for help because the roof is leaking again. And your husband is 3 towns over trying to sell beans to a man who only trades in bullets and grudges. If you're a man, the environment expects you to roam, to conquer, to make your mark. But no one tells you how. You wander the town looking for opportunity, but all the jobs are taken by people more desperate than you. You try to chat up the woman at the mercantile, but her brother cleans his shotgun loudly whenever you're around. You buy a drink for the saloon girl, but she's already calculating how much silver she'll need to make pretending worth her time. There's no safe space to be vulnerable. No place to confess that you're not looking for a wife, or a mother for your children, or a cook, or a housekeeper. That you're just looking for someone who doesn't make you feel like a ghost with taxes. But the town isn't built for that kind of honesty. It's built for utility. You are a cog, a function, a placeholder for whatever role the community hasn't filled yet. And God help you if you don't fit. The town is small, always small. Even if it feels big, even if it's growing, it's still too small for mistakes. Word gets around fast. You can't date casually. You can't experiment. You can't be unsure. Every interaction is interpreted, dissected, assigned meaning. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. You don't even get a first chance half the time. People decide who you are based on your hat, your boots, and whether you spit with conviction. Your house, if you can call it that, is a box on the edge of the map. It leaks. It groans. It smells like you. Not because you want it to, but because there's no plumbing and no one sells soap strong enough to overpower week-old stew fumes and existential dread. If you invite someone over, it's not to impress them. It's to prove you're not sleeping in a barn. And even then, you're judged. She walked into your cabin and saw a pile of laundry. You were saving that shirt for Sunday. She thought it was a dead animal. She left before you could explain. You live like this. You exist like this. Day after day. Season after season. Surrounded by dirt, discomfort, and people pretending not to notice each other's decay. You fall asleep listening to coyotes howl like they're laughing at your dreams. You wake up with your mouth dry, your knees stiff, and your hope shriveled like last week's apple. And still, somehow, you carry a tiny flicker of something in your chest. A foolish little fire that whispers maybe, just maybe, something good could still happen. Maybe tomorrow she'll smile at you. Maybe he'll ask how you're really doing. Maybe the dance hall won't smell like despair and wet shoes. Maybe let's talk about bathing. Or more accurately, the bold, fantastical notion of it. You probably imagine that before you go courting someone, before you knock on a door or attend a social gathering or, God forbid, attempt to dance, you'd wash, clean up, tidy your hair, smell like something other than damp wool and regret. But this is the Wild West, where bathing is less a routine and more an elaborate, seasonal ritual performed under the full moon with firewood and divine luck. Water isn't just scarce, it's suspicious. If it hasn't already been claimed by the livestock or cursed by whatever died upstream last spring, it has to be hauled from a well, boiled over a fire, poured into a tin tub that leaks if you breathe near it, and shared, yes, shared, by the entire household. And household doesn't just mean your immediate family. It might include 3 brothers, a widow aunt, 2 farm hands, and a travelling preacher who hasn't blinked since Easter. Bath Day is an event, and not in a good way. You bathe fast, you bathe cold, and you do it knowing full well someone used this water before you, and someone else will use it after you. Soap is rare. Scented soap is a myth. And conditioner? That's what happens to leather if you leave it near bacon grease. No one's hair shines. It just sort of sits there, matted, tangled, slightly offended. Now imagine trying to impress someone in this environment. You've scrubbed your face with a rag made of last year's bedsheet. You've dabbed a little bear grease behind your ears because that's the closest thing you've got to cologne. You've put on your least stained shirt and tried to flatten your hair with spit and desperation. You are, by all definitions of the West, ready. Except you're not. Not really. Because the bar for hygiene is so low it's underground. And still somehow you never reach it. You arrive at someone's doorstep. You try to smile without showing your teeth, because your teeth look like they've been in a knife fight. You tip your hat. You offer a small, respectful greeting. And then you stand there, sweaty, dusty, vaguely fermented, waiting to be judged like a prize hog with no ribbon. She invites you inside. That is, if her father approves, her brother isn't cleaning a rifle, and her family's not already using the good chair to store potatoes. The house smells like stew, soap ash, and someone's old fever. There's no foyer, no parlour, no hallway, just one room with everything in it. Bed, stove, table, laundry, and whatever pets they haven't eaten yet. You sit. You fold your hands. You try to ignore the goat in the corner chewing on a hymn book. You make conversation. Weather, crops, church. Whether or not you saw the comet last week that everyone's convinced was an omen. She asks about your land. You don't own land. You rent from a man named Eustace, who charges in corn and vague threats. You lie and say you're saving to buy a parcel near the river. She nods. You both pretend this is romantic. Outside, the street continues its business. A man yelling at his horse, a child chasing a runaway hat, the local drunk falling asleep in a barrel. None of it matters. All that matters is whether you can get through this conversation without offending her sensibilities, her parents, or God. And this is the best case scenario. More often, you don't even get invited inside. You stand on the porch, or the edge of the field, or outside the boarding house, tipping your hat every morning like it's going to change your fortune. You learn to fall in love from 20 feet away. You learn to read someone's entire soul from the way they water the geraniums, or how they smile at the mailman, but not you. There is no privacy, none. Every potential romance unfolds under the surveillance of bored neighbours, loose chickens, and someone's grandmother watching from the attic window like a prairie gargoyle. You try to carve out moments, a quick word after church, a shared look during quilting bees or branding days. But it's hard. You can't be too forward. You can't be too familiar. Touch is off limits unless you're married or saving someone from a runaway stagecoach. And even then, people will talk. Touch is rare, precious, electric. A hand on the wrist might as well be a proposal. A dance, one proper waltz at a harvest festival can be dissected into 10 years of implications. Did you look into her eyes? Did you linger too long on the bell? Did you thank her mother after? If not, you're already halfway to scandal. And scandal, in a town this size, is like a contagious yawn. One person catches it, and suddenly everyone's involved. You'll find yourself at the centre of a storm you didn't start, being judged for a courtship you never even intended, all because you offered someone a slice of pie and smiled too broadly while doing it. Sometimes you escape. You go riding, into the hills, the plains, the silence. Not because you're romantic, but because the walls of town close in like a sermon. Out there, it's just you, your horse, and the sky, which doesn't care if you're married or not. You think about her, or him, or whoever you can't talk to without the entire county noticing. You think about what you'd say, if you could, about how hard it is to just be near someone when the world is built to keep you apart. Because that's what the environment does. It doesn't just make dating difficult, it makes existing with any kind of softness nearly impossible. This world, the one of creaking floorboards and suspicious soup and tin-roofed dreams, is designed for utility, not emotion. It rewards endurance, not expression. You can be strong, quiet, useful, married, but you cannot be tender. Not openly, not safely. So you adapt. You tuck your feelings under your hat like a note no one's allowed to read. You learn to nod instead of speak, to work instead of hope, to survive instead of live. Because even standing next to someone you love, really love, feels like balancing on a fence post during a thunderstorm. It's thrilling, beautiful, and completely unsustainable. And yet, you keep doing it. Every day. Quietly. Without ceremony. Without promise. You exist in this environment, and somehow, that's still not the hardest part. Let's talk about shared space. Or rather the complete and utter absence of it. In the Wild West, space is everywhere. There are miles of plains, hills that stretch into silence, forests so wide they seem to swallow the sun, and yet somehow nowhere for two people to just be alone without it becoming either scandal or tragedy. Privacy exists in theory, like affordable boots or moral bank managers. In practice, it's a luxury few ever touch. Let's say you manage to form a connection with someone. Not a scandalous one, just something simple, human and quiet. Maybe you've exchanged letters. Maybe you've shared a dance. Maybe you've helped her carry a bucket, or he tipped his hat with a look that said more than a whole sermon. You want to talk again? Just talk, but where? The saloon? No, that's a man's world. A place where women who linger too long get branded things that rhyme with trouble and ruined. The church steps? Maybe if you enjoy gossip, awkward silences, and the constant sound of someone coughing up judgment. A walk outside town? Technically allowed, but if anyone sees you together without a chaperone, you'll both be married by lunch or publicly accused of misbehaviour, which is Wild West code for probably touched elbows. So you try to meet in the general store, the safest ground known to man and woman. But you're not alone. You're never alone. The shelves are full of lard, rope, and silent judgment. The storekeeper stares as you pretend to compare jars of beans for 10 straight minutes. A child sneezes near you, and someone from the back yells, "That's the 3rd time this week!" No one buys anything. You leave. Next idea. The post office. A stretch of countertop with a slot for letters and a man behind it who's read all of them. He knows every secret, every botched proposal, every romantic plea wrapped in flowered stationery and sent to a woman who now lives with a dentist in Idaho. You hand him your message, a note asking for a walk, a word, anything, and he raises one eyebrow like he already knows how this ends. And he does. Even the physical layout of the town works against you. Everything's exposed. Doors open to the street. Windows face each other. Alleys are used for dumping chamber pots, not romance. There is no us space, only everyone else's space. And inside the home, even worse. If you're a woman, your house is a constant flurry of labour and supervision. You don't own it, you manage it. Cooking, sewing, tending to siblings, sick relatives, or chickens that refuse to stay in their corner. There are no bedrooms, just partitions made from old blankets. You share your world with everyone. Every movement is watched. Every smile is timed. You can't even read a letter twice without someone asking if it's from that boy with the broken fence and good intentions. If you're a man renting a room in the boarding house, you get a bed, a trunk, and a sliver of floor that smells like feet and boiled cabbage. Thin walls, shared privy, and a roommate named Carl who sleep sings about wagon accidents. Bringing someone back here isn't just rude, it's impossible. There is no romantic conversation that survives Carl, so you make do. You linger near water pumps. You volunteer to help gather firewood and then try to stretch those trips into conversations. You start going to prayer meetings you don't believe in, because she does. You pretend to be interested in hymnals and beet farming and whatever else gives you an excuse to be near her without anyone noticing how much it matters. But they always notice. This world is small, and small worlds notice everything. There's a woman who watches the street from her porch like it's her calling. She hasn't left that chair in 4 years, but she knows who missed Mass last Sunday and who passed a note behind the tannery. Her name is Mrs. Dunley. No one crosses her. Her husband hasn't spoken since 1869, and no one blames him. You pass her once, walking behind the schoolteacher. You're not touching, you're not even speaking, but she sees. And 2 hours later, someone's aunt is asking you when the wedding is. You laugh politely. But that night, someone's brother shows up on your porch with a bottle, a frown, and a lot of pointed questions about your intentions. Because that's what this environment does. It doesn't just limit physical space, it infects mental space too. It turns every interaction into a transaction, every kindness into a contract, every smile into a signature. You can't just exist near someone, you must declare something. And if you don't, someone else will do it for you. Even the idea of time together is broken. In a world where most people wake before dawn, work until dusk, and collapse into bed like they've been shot in the lungs, there is no energy left for romance. You might see each other at church, at the general store, at funerals, and maybe, if you're incredibly lucky, at one of the rare community events cobbled together by desperate parents and over-ambitious pastors. The church picnic. A glorious affair with boiled meat, dusty lemonade, and awkward games meant to encourage wholesome mingling. You show up in your best, which means your shirt only has 3 stains instead of 5. She's wearing a bonnet you suspect used to be white. You exchange words about the weather, about the preacher's sermon, about how many people died of snake bites this year. Then she's called away to help with pie. You return to standing near a barrel of pickles, wondering if that counts as a date. That night, you write in your journal. Not because you're sentimental, but because it's the only place you can be honest. You describe the way she smiled at the little girl who dropped her cornbread, how she wiped her hands on her apron before shaking yours, how her voice didn't flinch when she asked how your mother was doing, even though she never met her. You write it all, then you hide it, because if someone finds it, you'll be laughed at, or judged, or both. That's the final piece of existence here. Concealment. The slow, grinding weight of having no space, physical, emotional, social, to be open, unguarded, sincere. You build your life like a shack, carefully, crookedly, with whatever you can find. You hope it holds. You hope no one sees how drafty it really is, how scared you are, how badly you want something that doesn't have to be earned with livestock or land deeds or years of mutual silence. Because that's the tragedy of space out here. It's everywhere. And somehow nowhere at all. You walk through it daily, you breathe it, you toil in it, you suffer in it, but you rarely, if ever, share it, not in the way that matters, and yet you still try. You pass someone in the street and offer a nod that says, "I see you." You help carry a basket just so your hands don't feel so empty. You save a piece of candy from a travelling peddler and give it to someone who's forgotten what sugar tastes like. Small things, quiet things, cracks in the walls the world built around you. And through those cracks, something tender pushes its way through. Not boldly, not fast, but stubbornly. Hope again. Ridiculous, fragile, impossible. But somehow it keeps showing up. There's a rooster somewhere, but you don't need it. You've already been awake for an hour, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince yourself that today won't be the day your back finally detaches from your spine and files for divorce. This is how every day begins on the frontier, not with peace or reflection or dreams of courtship, but with aches, dread, and a long list of things that can kill you before sunset. You stand up. Everything cracks. Your knees sound like a poker game between old bones and regret. Your feet are swollen. Your fingers don't straighten all the way anymore. This is normal. You're in your 20s, maybe 30s, which makes you a senior citizen by Wild West standards. If your teeth are still in your head and your lungs haven't betrayed you, you're winning. There's no coffee. There's no breakfast unless you count half a biscuit left over from last week that now doubles as a doorstop. You chew it anyway. It tastes like sadness. You swallow it dry. Outside, the air is cold in that way that seeps into your organs. You wear the same clothes as yesterday. You have one work shirt. It's not clean. It hasn't been clean in months. It smells like a combination of livestock, firewood, and ambition long since abandoned. You begin your day, and by day we mean the full, uninterrupted march of physical torment from sunup to sundown with no breaks, no praise, and no room for romantic thought. Your first task, water. The well is a quarter-mile from the cabin. The bucket is heavy, and the wind is strong enough to knock it sideways if you don't hold it just right. By the time you get back, you've spilled half of it, and your shoulder feels like it's full of rusty nails. Next, livestock. You feed the chickens who hate you. You chase the pigs who disrespect you. You shovel out the stable, which smells like someone lost a bet with nature. The cow kicks over the milk pail, again. You whisper something unholy and promise vengeance. She blinks at you like she's ready. And all this happens before sunrise. You're not alone in your suffering. Everyone works, no exceptions. Children as young as 4 are handed brooms buckets, and impossible expectations. Women tend gardens, spin wool, cook meals, clean everything, raise children, teach letters, and occasionally fight off raccoons with a soup ladle. And through it all, no one rests. Rest is for the weak, or dead, sometimes both. Now imagine, somewhere in this back-breaking schedule, you're expected to court someone, to present yourself as a viable partner, to impress, to charm, to woo. Wooing is not easy when your hands are blistered, your breath smells like raw onion, and you haven't blinked in 2 hours because your eyelids are crusted with hay dust. Let's say you're a man. You want to impress the school teacher. You've seen her at church. She walks like someone trying to avoid attention, but failing anyway. You've been thinking about her for weeks. But how do you pursue romance when your work schedule leaves you exactly 27 minutes of daylight and a small window where your pants aren't actively wet? You can't skip work to visit her. You can't even pause. Your boss, a man named Jedediah, whose beard has its own zip code, believes time off is for Easterners and invalids. If you so much as stop to tie your boot, someone else takes your job, or your horse, or both. So you work faster, harder. You try to finish your chores early, hoping to catch a glimpse of her near the post office. You injure your hand in the process, a long, jagged cut along your palm that bleeds into your shirt sleeve. You wrap it in a piece of old cloth and pretend it doesn't hurt. You'll deal with it later. Maybe. She never shows up. You go home, exhausted, defeated, still bleeding. You lie on your straw mattress and stare at the ceiling. The room smells like sweat, ash, and old stew. You hear rats arguing under the floorboards. One of them wins. The next day, the cycle repeats. This isn't occasional. This is life. And if you're a woman, somehow it's worse. You wake up in the dark. You stoke the fire. You boil water. You knead dough, churn butter, milk the goat, sweep the floor, scrub the clothes, wash the children, hang laundry, patch trousers, bake cornbread, and sew until your fingers look like they've been chewed on by a sewing machine with low self-esteem. Then, in your one moment of stillness, someone knocks. It's a suitor. He smells like livestock and sincerity. He holds a pie. You didn't ask for a pie. You didn't want company. You haven't brushed your hair. You haven't slept. You're wearing a dress made from an old curtain. You smile anyway. Because if you're rude, he tells people. And if he tells people, they stop asking. And if they stop asking, you become that woman. The one with no prospects. The one people whisper about in the pews. The one no one marries because she's too cold, or too opinionated, or too busy chasing raccoons with a ladle. So you entertain him, politely, exhaustedly. And when he leaves, you collapse in a chair with your head in your hands, knowing full well you have another hour of work before you can call the day done, and another 3 before your brain stops buzzing with everything you didn't say. Because dating in the Wild West isn't just hard, it's labour layered on labour, with a side of judgment, and a dessert made entirely of missed chances. Let's say, by sheer force of timing, dumb luck, and unintentional eye contact, you've managed to arrange a visit, not a date. There's no word for date yet. That concept won't exist for another few decades and several wars. What you have instead is calling, which sounds polite, but is really just advanced loitering in someone else's home while pretending to discuss wheat. It's your only evening off. You worked through lunch, skipped supper, and scrubbed your boots with lye soap until the smell burned your memory of happiness. Your shirt is cleanish. You borrowed it from a cousin. He doesn't know. You combed your hair with your fingers and have said a quick prayer to whatever deity handles social anxiety and mule sweat. You arrived just before sundown. She's already exhausted. Her hands are raw from shelling peas for 3 hours straight. There's flour in her eyebrows. She's been watching her siblings all day. 5 of them, all under the age of reason, which in frontier math means still sticky and loud. One of them bit her this morning. Another threw up something purple. She hasn't had time to look in a mirror since Tuesday, but she still puts on the ribbon. The ribbon is important. It's faded and fraying and barely holds her hair back, but it's a signal, a whisper, a thread of dignity in a world determined to strip her of it. She doesn't wear it for vanity. She wears it to say, I'm still here. I still matter. I am not just hands and chores and casseroles. You sit at the edge of a hard wooden chair and talk. The conversation is shallow. It has to be. You can't ask real questions. You can't talk about fear or dreams or loneliness that aches like a bone bruise. You ask about her garden. She asks about your harvest. You both pretend these are thrilling topics. Every sentence is carefully measured, passed through an invisible filter of what's appropriate, respectable, expected. Her father is in the next room. He's not listening. He's judging. Her mother is doing needlework and only pretends not to glance up every time your tone changes. Her little brother stares at you like you might steal something. You probably won't, but that doesn't stop him from throwing a spoon at you. You laugh. Because what else can you do? The whole visit lasts 20 minutes. When you leave, she smiles politely. You tip your hat. She closes the door. You walk home in the dark, down a road lit only by moonlight and disappointment, wondering if that smile meant, try again, or please don't come back. This is courtship as performance. Every gesture, every word, every nod is weighted with meaning you can't confirm. No one says what they feel. No one dares. Because feelings, real feelings, are messy. And in a town where everyone is busy surviving, mess is dangerous. You can't afford to have emotions that interrupt the chores. You want to tell her she looked beautiful. Not because of the ribbon, but because she still managed to smile through the fatigue. But instead, you talked about corn. Because corn doesn't scare anyone. Because corn doesn't get you branded too forward, or too familiar, or not marriage material. Now imagine doing this every week. Same time, same ribbon, same silent room filled with judgment and cobbler. That's what courtship is here. A repeating cycle of restrained affection disguised as civility, performed under the watchful eyes of people who haven't smiled since Lincoln was shot. And it's exhausting. It's not just the labour of survival. It's the emotional labour of pretending you're not slowly unravelling while trying to guess whether someone else is willing to unravel with you. But let's say you're not calling. Let's say you're already married. Surely the struggle ends there, right? No, not even close. Marriage doesn't erase the labour. It just adds more categories to it. Now, in addition to chopping wood, herding livestock, and rebuilding the roof every time a strong wind flirts with destruction, you're also expected to be romantic, to be emotionally available, to keep the spark alive. You have one spark, it's in the fire. You use it to cook beans. You come home from a 14-hour day, dragging a fence post behind you. Your wife has been canning vegetables since dawn, and is now boiling laundry in a cauldron that smells like someone cooked regret in it. You exchange 4 words. Long day? Yeah, you. And that's it. That's the spark. There is no quality time. There is only time between disasters. You want to bring her flowers, but flowers grow near the creek, and last time you went near the creek, you were bitten by a water snake with intimacy issues. You want to say something nice, but your brain is filled with dust, debts, and the sound of your own blood pressure rising with the drought forecast. She wants to be held, but your arms are sore, your shirt is damp, and the baby is finally asleep on her shoulder. You kiss her on the forehead, barely. She closes her eyes for one blissful second, and then the roof leaks again. You fix the leak with a pot. She returns to peeling potatoes. Neither of you cries. Crying takes energy. But the fatigue is more than physical. It's existential. You start to question what this is all for, what any of it means. You wonder if love was ever supposed to thrive here, or if it's just another myth, like soft beds and indoor plumbing. You think about your neighbour, the one who used to sing. He doesn't sing anymore. His wife left during a storm. Or maybe she died. No one knows. He doesn't speak much. Just tends his land and nods at you like a man remembering things he wishes he could forget. You think about your sister, married off at 16. Her husband drinks vinegar like it's medicine and won't let her wear shoes inside. She writes you letters in invisible ink, desperation masked as updates. You think about all the people who tried, who courted with pies and letters and awkward Sunday glances, and ended up living in quiet misery, waiting for the next harvest, the next flood, the next disappointment. And yet, you still try, because something inside you refuses to believe this is all there is. Because even when your hands are cracked, your heart is still hopeful. Because maybe, just maybe, somewhere in this heap of exhaustion and repetition, there's still a sliver of something tender that hasn't been crushed by drought, duty, or denial. You hold on to that. You don't know why. You just do. There's a myth that hardship brings people closer together. The idea that working side by side, hauling wood, and surviving windstorms and burying children you never got to name somehow create intimacy. A deep, unshakable bond forged in fire and filth. It sounds beautiful. It's mostly nonsense. Because hardship doesn't always bind. Sometimes it splinters. Sometimes it just makes people quiet. Not peacefully quiet, just silent. In that haunted, long stare across a dirt table sort of way. You start to forget what the other person's voice sounds like when it isn't asking for something or apologising for nothing. You both still love each other probably, but the words are heavy now. They don't come easily. They don't feel like gestures. They feel like chores. It's not that you've run out of affection. It's that affection now has to compete with everything else. The blight in the wheat, the infection in the goat's foot, the taxes you can't pay, the roof that leaks in 5 new places since last night's wind. You want to look into each other's eyes, but all you ever look into is the next task. Love doesn't vanish. It just gets buried under lists. And if you're still dating, not married, not yet, the labour doesn't make things easier. It makes them nearly impossible. Let's say you're one of the lucky few with time. You finish your date early. You have maybe half an hour before darkness swallows the town whole. You decide to go visit someone, not officially, not to call, just to walk past their house and wave. Maybe say something witty. Something that proves you're more than just dirt and calluses. You practice the line the whole way there. Then you see them on the porch, and your mouth dries up. and your brain forgets how words work. And all you can think about is how your shirt smells like cow, and your hair is shaped like it lost a bet. So you wave, they wave back. That's it. You walk home thinking of all the things you didn't say, all the ways you didn't show up right. You promise yourself you'll try again tomorrow. But tomorrow, the horse gets loose, and the fence breaks, and a storm rolls in, and by nightfall, you've forgotten what hope feels like. Because trying, really trying, to love someone while barely surviving is its own kind of exhaustion. You start to measure success not in smiles or connection, but in lack of damage. They didn't look away when you passed. Victory. They didn't scowl when you complimented their pie. Progress. They didn't say no when you offered to walk them home. A full-blown miracle. Every interaction becomes a high-wire act between sincerity and self-preservation. You want to be honest. But honesty is raw, and raw doesn't last long out here. People don't bleed feelings. They cauterize them with distance and sarcasm and a second helping of beans no one really wanted. And what about rejection? That special flavour of humiliation served with a side of public shame and a scoop of spiritual dread. If you ask someone to court you and they decline, even gently, even sweetly, it doesn't just sting, it scars. Because word gets around, because neighbours talk, because now every time you enter a room, someone tilts their head like a sympathetic horse and offers you the kind of pity usually reserved for barn fires and unexpected twins. You can't just shake it off. You carry it like a sack of bad potatoes. Like guilt passed down through inheritance, you start to second guess every kindness, every smile, every silence. You wonder if you're too poor, too strange, too broken. You stop writing letters. You stop ironing your shirt. You start showing up to church late, sitting in the back, and pretending the sermon makes sense even though your thoughts are stuck replaying a 2-minute interaction from 3 weeks ago that ended with maybe another time. But the worst part isn't the pain, it's the normalcy of it. No one is shocked when a romance falls apart here. No one gasps when a proposal is rejected, or a marriage dissolves into strained glances over burnt stew. Because failure isn't dramatic in the Wild West. It's expected. Quiet. Like mould. It just happens. And then it stays. And people keep working. Because what else is there? You still have to mend the fence. You still have to dig the well. You still have to bury the dog and patch the roof and take care of the neighbour's kid because his mother got bit by a spider that may or may not have been God's punishment for skipping tithes. You still have to survive. And if you're lucky, you might laugh. Once. Briefly. Maybe someone makes a joke about how chickens are the worst. Maybe someone sings a hymn off-key and it actually makes you feel something. Maybe someone brushes your hand in passing, just once, and you replay that touch for weeks, like it's a novel. Those moments, small, stupid, barely real, become lifelines. You hold on to them, not because they're enough, but because they're all you've got. Labour on the frontier never ends. It doesn't even pause. And love, if it exists at all, has to be carried like water. Carefully, urgently, spilling out a little more each day. Some days there's none left. Some days it rains. But mostly you just keep walking, bucket in hand, toward a well that might be dry by the time you get there. Because in the Wild West, dating wasn't a joy. It was a job. And no one paid you for it. There's a saying you'll hear whispered between bites of dry cornbread at church picnics. Everyone's equal in the eyes of God. Which is adorable. In the Wild West, everyone's equal in theory, but in practice, your value is a triangle of three awkward legs. What you own, who you know, and how white you are. And when it comes to dating, that triangle becomes a cage. Start with property. If you don't own land, livestock, or at least a half-decent horse that hasn't bitten someone this week, you're not a prospect. You're just scenery. A functional background character in someone else's romance plot. Maybe good for a dance at a barn party, but not good enough to share a surname with. Wealth, of course, is relative. You don't need to be rich, you just need to have something. A family name, a working mule, a plot of dirt with a fence that mostly stays upright. If you don't, your affection is worthless. Not offensive, just invisible. Romantic intentions without financial stability are seen as delusion. People will smile at you the way they smile at someone who just fell off a ladder and insists they're fine despite the nails sticking out of their forehead. If you're a man with no land, no income, and no family connections, you're a dreamer. And dreamers are cute, but they don't get wives. They get warned. If you're a woman with no dowry, no inheritance, and no feminine virtue, you're a burden. A project. A story to be explained by aunties using euphemisms like independent spirit or difficult temperament. Now flip the roles. Let's say you do have wealth. You're the son of rancher who owns half the valley. You ride a decent horse, wear boots without holes, and your shirt smells like actual soap. People smile differently when you enter a room. They ask about your mother's health. They suggest you try their daughter's pie. She bakes now. Took it up just last week. Never mind that she's 17 and terrified. Status does that. It makes you visible. But visibility brings obligation. If you're upper class, you're expected to marry appropriately. That means choosing a partner who enhances your family's standing, not your mood. Love isn't irrelevant, just deeply inconvenient. No one cares if you two laugh. They care if she has property near water and cousins in Denver. And if you don't comply? If you fall for the blacksmith's daughter with the crooked smile and one stubborn dimple? Well, that becomes a problem. People start talking. Family meetings are held. Invitations dry up. Someone takes you aside to explain how love is a luxury and not sustainable without proper planning. You're told you're being irresponsible, that you'll never fit in, that your children will inherit poverty, laziness, or, worse, non-standard table manners. This isn't cruelty, it's math. You're a number. She's a number. And the only equation that matters is whether your union increases wealth, status, or respectability. If it doesn't, you're a fool. If it does, congratulations. Your life is now an investment portfolio with matching rings. It's not just class, it's race, it's culture, it's reputation. And in a town small enough to fit inside a prayer circle, reputation isn't just part of courtship. It is courtship. One wrong flirtation, one misinterpreted glance, and your entire standing collapses like a rotting barn in high wind. You become that girl, that boy, the one who tried above their station, the one who should have known better. People will smile to your face and eulogize your options behind your back. If you're a woman, the humiliation is worse. You're constantly being evaluated, weighed, inspected, not for who you are, but for what you represent. Are you good stock? Do you look healthy? Can you cook, sew, pray, raise babies, endure disappointment, and do it all while smiling through a heatwave? It's not a relationship. It's an audition. If you fail, even slightly, your name drops from the list. And that list is everything. Men can recover. They can ride out into another town, reinvent themselves with a new name and an old hat. Women can't. Women stay where they fall. And God help you if you try to marry down. It doesn't matter if he's kind, loyal, funny, or honest. If he has calloused hands instead of soft ones, you're seen as settling. People pity you like you caught a disease from the wrong handshake. They ask invasive questions about his upbringing. They wonder aloud if he can even write his name. You spend the rest of your days defending your choice, and he spends the rest of his proving he's worthy. The imbalance never goes away. Love doesn't erase the gap. It just adds weight to it. In theory, courtship is a personal matter. Two people meet. They connect. They make awkward small talk. Maybe he trips over a feed sack. Maybe she laughs a little too loud. Something sparks, the beginning of something tender, or messy, or at least interesting. In the Wild West, this theory doesn't exist. Here, courtship isn't between two people. It's between two families, two economic units, two names whispered through town with cautious reverence or amused contempt. And if you're thinking of coupling with someone, everyone else already has. You're not courting her. You're courting her entire community. And they're not impressed. Let's say you're a young man. You've taken a liking to Sarah McBride. She's sharp, steady, and once beat 3 grown men at poker using only a deck of hand-me-down card and her stare. You've admired her for months. Finally, you gather the courage to approach. By sundown, 4 people have already asked her father if it's true. Someone has told the blacksmith you've been lurking. A deacon stops you at church to gently remind you that the McBrides expect a certain kind of gentleman. You nod. You smile. You go home and scream into a sack of hay. Because in this world, intention is interrogation. Everything is a test. If you're too bold, you're forward. If you're too hesitant, you're weak. If you're too smooth, you're a flirt. If you're awkward, you clearly have something to hide. You can't win. You can only perform. And hope no one notices how much you're sweating through your good shirt. Now reverse the roles. Let's say you're Sarah. You never even spoke to the man. You passed him on your way to the well and nodded politely because your mother raised you right. By nightfall, you're the talk of dinner tables. People are asking if you're involved, if you have feelings, if you plan to marry. You don't even know his last name. Your mother tells you to be careful. Your father sharpens a knife. You do nothing, and that nothing is enough to cost you your reputation. Because in the West, your social value as a woman is a house of cards, and the wind always blows. Even an innocent crush is dangerous, especially if it's obvious. A woman showing desire, real, unfiltered, unapproved desire, is like a thunderstorm in the schoolhouse. Loud, frightening, completely unacceptable. If you confess to liking someone unsuitable, you become the punchline. If you write them a note, you become the scandal. And if you're caught speaking privately, even once, with someone unvetted, unmarried, or just unexpected, you might as well start packing your bonnet and head east. The shame is instant and permanent. Let's talk about reputation punishment. There's no jail for bad choices in love. There's just social consequence. A soft-spoken, relentless kind of cruelty where everyone suddenly becomes busy when you enter a room, where no one asks how your mother's doing, where your name is no longer said with curiosity, but caution. No one throws stones. They just stop bringing pie. For women, Shame is passive-aggressive exile. For men, it's a bit louder. If you're too flirtatious, you're labelled dishonourable. If you're seen visiting too many homes, or worse, too many women of uncertain standing, your name starts to rot. Employers stop calling. Horses start disappearing. You find your boots filled with salt one morning. A warning. A reminder. Respectability isn't earned. It's maintained. Like an outhouse, ugly, precarious, and prone to collapse if you forget to keep checking. But the worst part? It doesn't take scandal to be humiliated. All it takes is trying to ask someone out of your league, trying to pursue someone with more land, or more name, or more uncles in local politics, trying to love someone the town hasn't approved yet, because the Wild West might have been lawless in the newspapers, but in real life, it was full of invisible rules, especially about love. You don't date outside your class. You don't date too soon after a death. You don't date someone who's been around. You don't date someone with a limp, a stutter, a past, a debt, a child or a brother who owes whiskey money to the saloon. And if you do, well, you're not just making a bad choice. You're embarrassing everyone who ever knew you. You've brought shame to the family, which is somehow worse than cholera. It doesn't matter if your love is real. It doesn't matter if you're kind. The social ladder here is made of rickety wood and old grudges. One wrong step and you fall. And the only sound is polite coughing and someone folding a napkin a little too firmly. And heaven help you if you try to escape it. If you dare to say, out loud, that maybe people should be able to choose who they love, regardless of acreage or ankle modesty, you'll be labelled strange, idealistic, naive, trouble. Because in this town, expectation is king, and humiliation is the price of rebellion. So what do people do? They settle. They marry the safe choice. They choose the partner who won't raise eyebrows, even if they never raise your heartbeat. They attend the wedding. They hold the hand. They eat the cake. They whisper about the people they didn't marry, and they survive, which is all that was ever expected of them anyway. There's an old belief in towns like this, dusty, proud, one saloon too many, and two churches too few, that a man is the head of the house, and a woman is the heart. It sounds poetic. It's not. It's code. It means he makes the rules, and she makes them feel better. And when it comes to dating and marriage, this belief becomes a sentence. Not the criminal kind, but the slow, suffocating kind you live inside for decades without realising how small the walls are getting. Because even after you pass all the tests, even after you find someone appropriate, someone approved, someone marriageable, the hierarchy doesn't stop. It just changes shape. Let's start with the double standard. If you're a man, your past is forgiven. Encouraged even. Had a few wild years? No problem. You were sowing oats, slept around, just finding yourself. Got in a few brawls, maybe killed a man in a poker fight. That's character. But if you're a woman, no oats for you. No self-defined. You're expected to arrive at adulthood perfectly preserved, emotionally pure, and preferably unaware of how kissing works. If you've spoken to more than 2 men, people whisper. If you've hugged someone outside your family, people stop whispering. And if you've ever been married and your husband died, whether from illness, accident, or your excellent aim, you carry the label widow like a scarlet W sewn onto your apron. Even purity isn't a shield. If you're too quiet, you're suspicious. If you're too loud, you're unruly. If you speak your mind, you're unladylike. If you don't, you're cold. You can't win. And once you marry, you still can't. Because now you belong. Not in the sweet, romantic Netflix subtitles kind of way, but literally. Property laws in most frontier towns don't recognise women as independent citizens once married. You cannot own land. You cannot sign a contract. Your wages, if you earn them, go directly to your husband. Your body is considered part of the household. Your consent is optional. Your voice, advisory at best. People say she married well, when what they mean is her husband doesn't hit her where it shows. This isn't dramatisation. It's documentation. Husbands can legally discipline their wives. In some places the rule is no thicker than your thumb. A reference to the size of the stick a man may use. Not everyone does it, but everyone could. And that's enough. Because power doesn't have to be used to be felt. It just has to exist. Now picture romance in that world. Picture a girl, 17 maybe, sitting on her porch in a dress she made herself from fabric traded for eggs and gossip. She's smart, curious. She likes stars and stories and the idea that someone might know her middle name without being told. A man rides up, older, wealthy, recently widowed. He speaks to her father. He brings flowers. He brings expectation. She has no say. Not really, because the idea of choosing someone, truly choosing, doesn't apply to her. She is chosen, like a horse, like a tablecloth, like land. And if she objects, she is difficult. She is ungrateful. She is throwing away her future. So she says yes. And everyone claps. Now picture him, that same man, 40 maybe, wants companionship, wants help on the farm, wants heirs. He doesn't really know her, but she's young, obedient, easy on the eyes. He doesn't love her, but love's not the point. Stability is. Ownership is. Reputation is. So he proposes, and everyone nods. No one asks either of them what they feel, because feelings are not infrastructure. They don't grow crops, they don't mend socks, they don't settle disputes between cousins. Love is nice, but marriage is serious. Even the good ones, the marriages that work, are often built on resignation, on compromise, on quietly swallowing wants you don't have words for yet. You learn to live with someone, not love. Live. There is no therapy. There are no heart-to-hearts. There are just two people sharing a bed, a roof, a life, and the growing suspicion that no one else is quite as tired as you. If you're lucky, you laugh sometimes. If you're lucky, he listens. If you're lucky, she forgives you for becoming the man your father was. But luck doesn't change the structure. You're not equal, even in love, even when it's good. And when it's not? When the romance breaks? When the kisses stop and the chores pile up and the baby won't sleep and your husband won't speak and your name becomes something said at you, not to you. You endure. Because leaving is unthinkable. Divorce is scandalous. Separation is shameful. The only socially acceptable way out of a bad marriage is death, his or yours. And even then there's paperwork, so you stay, and people admire your strength. They say things like, she really held it together, and he's a good man, just a bit tired. They never ask if you're happy, because no one is. Not really, not openly. And that's the secret at the heart of all this hierarchy. Not that people suffer, but that they suffer quietly, in rooms lined with expectations and wallpapered with polite lies. They sit across from the person they once courted and wonder when love turned into inventory. They share meals and manage land and raise children and smile for photographs that won't be invented for another 40 years. And every so often, when no one's looking, they whisper to themselves, "Is this it?" Then they put the kettle on and start the day again, because the rules must be followed, and the heart, that unruly, impolite, humiliating little organ, must wait its turn. You don't get to fall in love in the Wild West. You petition for it. You submit a verbal application, often to a third party, a parent, a preacher, or a neighbour named Agnes, who inserts herself into everything. And then you wait for spiritual clearance, community consensus, and, ideally, a sign from God that this person will not lead you directly into the arms of eternal damnation. Because out here, dating isn't just social, it's theological. Welcome to the frontier, where everyone knows your business, your secrets, your family tree, and what colour socks you wore to the town picnic in 72. The church bell rings 6 times a day, not to mark time, but to remind you that God and Mrs. Dunley are watching. Let's be clear, religion isn't just part of the culture, it is the culture. The social order is built on a pulpit. The rules of courtship, marriage, modesty, and morality are handed down in pews between fire and brimstone sermons and gentle requests for baked goods. The pastor doesn't just speak for the Lord, he speaks for your in-laws, your employer, and your neighbour's goat. His opinion isn't advisory, it's legislative. And what does he say? He says courtship must be chaste. He says women must be modest. He says men must be respectful. He says all affection must be publicly supervised and spiritually justified, or else the devil gets a front row seat to your eternal regrets. He says this, all of it, while making awkward eye contact with the couple who are caught holding hands behind the stable. Everyone listens. No one breathes. Because religious control doesn't show up with whips or swords. It shows up in whispers, in judgment, in the way people look at you after you smiled at the wrong person too long. You don't want to be looked at. Not like that. So you adapt. You smile shorter. You touch less. You dream quietly. You tell yourself it's better this way, safer, holier, but inside a part of you starts to shrink. Not from sin, but from silence. Because there's no place to ask questions. No room to say, I think I love someone who isn't approved. Or, I want more than just someone to survive next to. Or, I think maybe this thing inside me doesn't fit the script I was handed. No room for doubt. No vocabulary for difference. Only belief. And belief in this town means obedience. You don't just follow the rules. You perform them. That performance happens in every part of your love life. At church, you sit with your family. If you're courting, you sit 3 feet apart on a bench that creaks loudly at the mere suggestion of physical attraction. If your knee touches hers, a child gasps. If your shoulder brushes his, a widow faints. You sing hymns together. You pretend that's intimacy. You pass each other pie at the church potluck and act like that's foreplay. You read from the good book, alternating verses like it's romantic dialogue, and if you're especially brave, you might look up from the page long enough to catch a glance. That glance is the Wild West equivalent of a steamy love letter. And it better end there. Because anything more, a secret note, a sneaky kiss, a moonlit meeting, means you are risking not just social status, but moral condemnation. You won't be flogged, but you'll be watched. Every move, every word, every absence from service. Someone will notice, someone will comment, and someone always will pray for you. You know the prayer isn't for your benefit, it's a warning. It's Sunday morning and your collar's too tight. You've ironed your best shirt, the one with only one button missing, and your boots are shined to a dull, dusty, almost polish. The church is full, always is. It's not just for the sermons. It's the only place in town where everyone is guaranteed to be in the same room, judging the same people, under the same God. You sit 2 rows back from her. You don't speak. You don't touch. You barely glance. But you both know the timing of each other's breath. This is what passes for intimacy now. Synchronized piety. She wears her Sunday bonnet pulled low, a modest ribbon pinned at the neck of her collar. You remember the colour from last week? Light blue, not quite grey. Faded in a way that makes you ache, though you wouldn't dare say why. If she's interested, she'll drop her handkerchief on the church steps. It's not an accident. It's never an accident. You wait for a sign like that because anything more would be considered forward. And forward is dangerous. Forward is what ruins women and brands men as lechers. Forward gets you whispered about, until even the neighbours' chickens start clucking your name in disapproval. So you become fluent in a language of shadows. A glance held half a second longer than polite, a shared verse under breath. A thank you with meaning hidden in the tone. It's the only way. Because open affection is forbidden. Not officially, not always, but spiritually. And in the Wild West, spiritual shame is more feared than any noose or gun. People are more terrified of looking sinful than being sinful, and so every gesture is cloaked in righteousness. You walk her home after service? Fine. If her father walks behind you like a chaperone in a funeral procession. You send her a note? Acceptable. If it's sealed with wax and mentions nothing more romantic than the harvest. You bring her a pie? Charming. If you give the same pie to her father first. This constant moral performance isn't just exhausting, it's a strategic. Because the social hierarchy isn't built from who you know, it's built from how good you appear. And in the West, goodness means modesty. Modesty in dress, modesty in word, modesty in thought. There are pamphlets passed out warning women that showing too much ankle could lead to eternal damnation. There are sermons dedicated to the dangers of flirtation, equating a slightly bold smile with the first step towards Sodom and or Gomorrah. Boys are told to control themselves. Girls are told not to tempt them. It's a neat little loop of blame that somehow always ends up circling women. You're told that to be desired is shameful, but to be undesired is failure. That to be pursued is risky, but to be ignored is embarrassing. That your worth lies in being modest, but also magnetic, pure, but also promising. How do you date in that fog? How do you flirt when desire itself is criminal? How do you fall in love when the entire structure is built to punish momentum? You get creative. You pass messages through siblings. You press flowers into books and lend them with silent meaning. You bake bread with extra cinnamon and give it to him, knowing he'll understand. You walk slower on purpose, letting him catch up just enough to say, hello. It's a kind of romance, but it's not free. Because under every gesture is fear, not of rejection, of exposure. The moment someone sees too much in your eyes, the moment someone hears too much in your voice, you risk your standing. Not just with your lover, but with your pastor, your family, your future. The risk is greater for women, of course. It always is. A man who strays is just being a man. A woman who does the same is lost. A man can sin and be redeemed. A woman can sin and be ruined. So girls learn to walk quietly, speak softly, and wear self-denial like a second corset. They learn that to be desired is power and threat. They learn that affection must always come with apology. And the worst part, they believe it. Belief isn't always chosen. Sometimes it's inherited, like bad knees or a fear of snakes. Sometimes it's taught with smiles and pie and 1,000 hymns about obedience. By the time you're 16, you've memorized what's allowed and what's not. But you still wonder. You wonder if anyone ever told the truth and lived. You wonder if two people ever fell in love here, truly, madly, openly, and weren't punished for it. You wonder if God would really mind a kiss behind the barn. You wonder if he already saw it. And you wonder if he smiled. Belief out here is bigger than the Bible. It seeps into everything. The weather, the crops, the way your horse looks at you funny after you lie. It's not just scripture. It's superstition. It's stories passed down from grandmothers with cloudy eyes and nothing left to prove. People in the West don't just fear God, they fear bad luck, ill omens, witchcraft, and morally compromised livestock. And when it comes to love, nothing, absolutely nothing, is safe from that fear. If your courtship fails, it wasn't poor communication or incompatible goals. It was the devil. If you feel too strongly, too quickly, it's not passion, it's temptation. If you can't stop thinking about someone, even when they're wrong for you, people don't call it obsession. They call it a hex, a curse laid on you by a jealous ex, a spiteful neighbour, or some travelling woman with too many rings and not enough Jesus. These aren't jokes. People believe this, still do in some places. If your love life turns sour, you're told to pray harder. If you fall for someone out of your godly circle, you're told to repent. If you stay unmarried too long, they send someone to sprinkle salt on your doorstep, to break the curse, to reset the energy, to convince your bad luck isn't from being picky, but from a generational sin involving someone who once danced too close to a fiddle. You laugh because it sounds ridiculous, but you check under your pillow anyway, just in case. Because belief out here isn't just enforced by church or family, it's enforced by silence. You don't have to be punished to feel controlled. All you have to do is know that people are watching and that they believe. They believe you should wait. They believe you should feel guilt for wanting someone too much. They believe a kiss outside of marriage invites damnation. And most insidiously, they believe you're better off alone than impure. So what do you do with your feelings? You repress them. You bundle them up like winter blankets and hide them under your good mattress. You channel them into chores, prayers, and vague journal entries no one will ever read. You tell yourself it's fine, that maybe your feelings aren't real, that maybe love is a weakness anyway, that maybe all those stories about fire and brimstone are right, but at night you dream, and in dreams you sin. Not dramatically, not salaciously, just freely. You hold hands without judgment. You dance in the open. You kiss someone in broad daylight and nobody screams. You confess your heart without fear of scandal. And you don't wake up screaming. You wake up longing. But then you sit up. And remember what belief has taught you. That love is a minefield. That desire must be tamed. That happiness must pass through gates of permission. You remember that even a good marriage, one blessed by the pastor, applauded by the town, and legally sealed by ink and witnesses, can still feel like a performance. Because even then, You're expected to behave, to be modest, to keep your joy measured. Too much affection in public. You're called indecent. Too much praise for your spouse. You're called prideful. Too many nights without children. You're asked if something's wrong. Belief doesn't stop at the wedding. It walks into your home, uninvited, and tells you how to feel love correctly. It critiques your timing, your body, your choices, and worse, it teaches you to critique yourself. Because once a belief system is inside you, you don't need a preacher to enforce it. You do it for them. Every hesitation you have before reaching for someone's hand, that's belief. Every moment of shame after a harmless kiss, that's belief. Every night you lie awake wondering if you're going to hell for dreaming of someone else's collarbone, that's belief. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And the whispers sound a lot like your own voice. So you start to wonder, not just what you believe, but whether belief itself is safe to question. You wonder what would happen if you broke the rules, just once. If you met someone's eyes for a little too long. If you let yourself say what you mean. If you admitted, out loud, that you want something more than a quiet life, a good name, and a marriage that looks right in photographs but feels empty on Sundays. You wonder if that's evil, or if it's the only honest thought you've had all week. You wonder if God would understand. You hope he would. You don't pray about it, though. Not yet. Instead, you say a simpler prayer. Not for love, not for purity, just for one day. One single day, where you could be who you are and love who you want without fear of heaven, hell, or Harriet down the road who still thinks you smiled too much at her brother in 1879. You whisper that prayer into your pillow, then you fold it up again and go to sleep. Because in the West, belief is everything, and love is what gets trapped inside it. There's a fine line between romance and crime. In the Wild West, that line doesn't exist. Let's say you're walking into town. Your shirt is clean. The wind hasn't slapped you too hard today. You've made peace with your breath and your boots. And there, outside the general store, is the girl you've been thinking about since spring thaw. She's tying her bonnet in that way that suggests patience and a low-level fear of wind. You tip your hat. She nods. It's perfect. And then a rattlesnake drops from the awning and ruins everything. That's the Wild West. Always one reptile away from chaos. Trying to date here is like romancing someone while someone else loads a gun behind your back. Not necessary to shoot you, but maybe. Because in this world, danger isn't the exception, it's the setting, the default, the background music of every moment. Start with the diseases: tuberculosis, cholera, dysentery, scarlet fever, typhoid. Things that sound like they were invented by people trying to make medieval Europe feel better about itself. You could court someone for 6 months, passing notes, exchanging glances, shaking hands through lace gloves, and then watch them vanish into fever overnight. One day she's there, the next her rocking chair sits still. No warning, no cure. Romance becomes roulette. You don't plan ahead. You don't whisper about forever. You whisper about next Thursday maybe. If the water holds. If the bugs hold off. If the preacher survives the infection, he caught baptizing someone in that cursed creek again. Even if no one dies, someone might cough. And that cough changes everything. A cough is a scandal. A cough means maybe wait. A cough means you suddenly remember your chores and politely sprint into the woods. And if it's not illness, it's injury. Because courtship means travel. And travel means horses. And horses in the Wild West are like dating apps with hooves. Temperamental, fast, and very likely to throw you into a cactus just when things start getting romantic. You might try to ride to her homestead with a bouquet of clumsily cut wildflowers and a second-hand poem. But your horse steps in a gopher hole. You fall, break a rib. The bouquet lands in manure. By the time you arrive, you're bleeding, limping, and reciting the poem backwards through a split lip. She says, "Thank you." You don't remember what happens next. But let's say you do survive the approach. Let's say you manage to sit with her under a tree, knees almost touching, fireflies flickering like quiet approval from God. You say something nice. She laughs. Everything is gentle, intimate. Then a bear walks past. Doesn't attack, just walks. You both freeze. You both stop breathing. The bear keeps going. The moment is gone. You try to restart the conversation. You say, "So, anyway, I was saying..." But you weren't saying anything. You were trying to feel something. Now you feel like bait. It's absurd, but no one laughs. Because this is just how dating works here. Everything has a 30% chance of involving livestock or gunfire. Even the proposal. Because proposals aren't private, they're public events. You don't get down on one knee in secret. You announce your intentions to a room full of tired relatives who nod solemnly and ask about your potato yield. And sometimes you're not the only one proposing. There are stories, real ones, of two suitors arriving to propose on the same day, unaware of each other. One comes on horseback, the other by wagon. They meet at the front porch. No one knows what to do. They duel. Not with pistols. That would be civilized, with insults, spoons, and a wrestling match in the muddy part of the yard, while the object of their affection watches from the window like she's waiting for a playbill. Winner gets the blessing. Loser gets pie, if he's lucky. And if you think that's bad, remember this. Sometimes marriage happened by accident. There are towns where being witnessed walking home with someone after dark twice could legally be interpreted as intent to wed. There are pastors who take prolonged eye contact as consent. There are neighbours who'll start sewing you matching quilts just because you shared a hymn book. Love is not a slow burn. It's a wildfire. Or a misunderstanding, or both. Let's say you compliment her dress. That's fine. Let's say you compliment it twice. Now her aunt is in the pantry praying about dowries. It gets worse if alcohol is involved. Because the Wild West didn't ban whiskey. It banned sanity after whiskey. There are stories of men proposing during saloon nights, forgetting they proposed, and waking up the next day legally wed to a woman named Ruby, who owns 3 chickens and a knife collection. When asked about it, Ruby shrugs and says, "He said forever. I believe in commitment." You don't undo that. You adapt. And what about love letters? Surely that was safe? No, absolutely not. Letters could be intercepted, read aloud, misquoted or sold. Yes, sold. There's an actual case of a man's love letters being auctioned off after he backed out of a courtship. They were read aloud at a church picnic for entertainment. The final one ended with the line, "Yours in patience and piety," which everyone found hilarious. He left town. Romance becomes a joke, a threat, a hazard, and still, you try. Because despite the disease, the bears, the duels, and the chance of being married in your sleep, you want it. You want to love someone. You want to feel seen in a place where everything's dust, rules, and horse noise. You want one thing, one simple human thing, to make sense. But it doesn't. Because in the Wild West, even love wears spurs and might shoot you by accident. You want love. What you get is paperwork. Let's say things go well. You like each other. You've made it through the awkward phase of misread glances and cow-related interruptions. You've survived cholera season, fire season, flood season, and the season where raccoons get aggressive for no reason. Now you want to make it official. And by official, we mean marriage. Because dating without marriage here is like owning a horse you refuse to name. Strange, suspicious, and likely to end in court. But the path to marriage isn't romantic. It's bureaucratic horror. You need permission. Not from each other. That would be too simple. You need approval from your family, their family, the pastor, the town clerk, and at least 2 elderly people who remember your birth and feel qualified to assess your moral potential. Then there's the blood test. Not the modern kind. The old-fashioned, look into his eyes and see if he blinks too much when we say monogamy test. Sometimes it's a literal physical exam conducted by a doctor who owns one book and thinks sneezing is a sign of weak character. You also need witnesses, at least 3. Preferably one who can read, one who can ride, and one who can dig a grave, just in case. Why? Because marriage isn't just romantic. It's risky. People die from it. Not metaphorically. Literally. There are documented cases of weddings ending in shootouts, horse stampedes, allergic reactions to wildflower bouquets, and one tragic incident where a guest caught on fire because someone lit a celebratory cigar too close to the muslin decorations. Still want to get married? Great. Now let's talk about the ceremony. It's not glamorous. It's usually held in a church with no roof, no windows, and a pew full of judgmental great aunts who've already decided you're doing it wrong. The preacher is often half drunk, half deaf, and entirely too excited to talk about submission. You wear your best clothes. Your best clothes are beige. Everything is beige. The whole ceremony takes 17 minutes, followed by a potluck, a square dance, and at least one man vomiting near the well. If you're lucky, you get to kiss, but only once, lightly, in front of everyone. If it lasts longer than 2 seconds, someone coughs loudly, and the pianist changes keys in protest. Romantic, isn't it? Now you're married. Now the real horror begins, because courting was absurd. But marriage is terrifying. You've spent months trying to look your best, act your best, speak in ways that suggest competence and humility and a deep knowledge of Scripture. You've passed every test. You've played every role. Now you wake up next to a human person and you realise you know nothing. You don't know how they sleep. You don't know how they smell in the morning. You don't know their opinion on root vegetables, rainstorms, or your snoring. You've seen them in church, not in crisis. You've read their letters, not their laundry list of daily grievances. You don't know how they argue. You don't know if they cry. You don't even know if they believe in bathing weekly or seasonally. And now you have to find out intimately. There's no going back. There's no cooling off period, no trial run, no therapist. Just 2 people thrown into a cabin with 3 walls and a rat problem, expected to build a life while also remembering to feed the mule and not die of diphtheria. It's absurd, and nobody warns you. They just smile and say, you'll learn. What they mean is, you'll suffer until you adapt. There are newlywed horror stories so common, they're practically bedtime tales. The groom, who forgot his bride's name during introductions. The bride who mistook her husband's mother for the cook and asked her to fetch more stew. The couple who discovered they hated each other's voices but had to share a bed anyway because there was only one room and 2 sheep were already in the other one. Even happy couples struggled, because there's nothing romantic about trying to start a fire in winter while your spouse cries over burnt cornbread, and you argue about whether God is punishing you or just giving you character. It's not all bad. Sometimes they make each other laugh. Sometimes they find a rhythm. But the road there is chaos. Pure, awkward, dirt-caked chaos. Want to know the worst part? Sometimes people didn't even mean to marry the person they married. There's the legal absurdity of accidental unions, thanks to confusing laws, nosy witnesses, and the tendency for frontier towns to turn literally any affectionate gesture into a binding agreement. If you kiss someone at midnight on a Sunday, that's binding. If you call someone darling twice in public, also binding. If you share a canteen in the desert and don't explain that it's not a metaphor for lifelong commitment, guess what? You're married now. Hope you both like beans. And annulments, good luck. You'd have better chances convincing a cactus to forgive your sins. There's a phrase people use to describe frontier relationships. Complicated. That's generous. More accurate. Unstable performance art conducted under duress with livestock and witnesses. Because even if you get the girl, or boy, or spouse adjacent, you don't get peace. You get romantic emergencies. Let's say someone else also likes the person you're courting. Happens all the time. There are only so many people who can spell their name and still have teeth. But there are no dating apps. No casual rejection. Just duels. Not always with guns. Though yes, sometimes with guns. More often with drama. One suitor writes a poem, the other writes a better one. Someone starts showing up at church with suspiciously fresh bread every Sunday. Someone else starts volunteering to mend fences they never cared about before. You find yourself locked in an escalating, passive-aggressive Olympics where the prize is possibly being tolerated forever by someone whose father already hates you. It gets violent fast. There are recorded cases, real ones, of love triangles ending with one man falling into a cactus pit, one woman stealing a horse, changing her name, and marrying neither of them. A shootout in the church vestibule involving a hymnal used as a bludgeon. The sheriff's report said, and I quote, "None fatally injured, only pride." Pride, by the way, is the most fragile organ on the prairie. It only takes a comment like, "He's got nice boots," to start a feud that lasts 3 winters. Because jealousy isn't just emotional here, it's lethal confusion. Let's say your sweetheart receives a gift. A scarf, maybe. Who sent it? You. Her cousin. The mysterious man from the trading post who says he's just passing through. Suddenly you're interrogating everyone like a detective in a bad novel. You leave anonymous notes. You dig holes near your rival's outhouse. You start showing up early to everything, just to glare across the room with the intensity of someone who slept 2 hours in 4 days and considers barn smells a romantic advantage. The worst part, you might not even be the one she likes. You could just be a background character in her story. You think you're the protagonist. She thinks you're that guy who keeps showing up with onions and a suspicious limp. Identity confusion was real. There are entire tales of women accidentally engaged to the wrong brother because both wore the same hat. No one corrected them until after the ceremony. Another woman agreed to marry Samuel, not realizing there were 2 Samuels in town. She meant the kind one who played fiddle. She got the one who thought bathing was a government conspiracy. And yet, No one unmarries. You just adapt. Adjust. Pretend you were meant to end up with the right Samuel all along. Because pride must be maintained. Even if your last name now rhymes with mildew. And what about romantic injuries? You haven't truly courted someone in the Wild West until you've broken a toe trying to impress them during a square dance. Burned your hand baking bread you claimed was your specialty. Dislocated a shoulder while trying to rescue their cat from a roof that did not want to be climbed. Love doesn't just hurt metaphorically, it physically mauls you. There are no bandages, just shame and a dish towel. You try to act cool. You try to say it's just a scratch. But you're visibly bleeding from both eyebrows. She says, "That was sweet." You faint. And let's not forget mixed signals. Because if dating was confusing before literacy, try it with uneven education and high-stress environments. You say, "I like you." She hears, "I want to marry you, raise 6 children, and take over your father's pig farm." You say, "Maybe we could spend time together." She replies, "I'm flattered, but I've already agreed to marry the tax assessor because he has reliable mules." You smile politely. You leave town. And then, of course, there's the classic, the unwanted admirer. You're not interested. You've said so, politely, repeatedly. But he keeps showing up, with flowers, with poems, with things he claims are tokens of affection, but look suspiciously like taxidermy experiments. He says, "I know we're meant to be." You say, "You put a dead raccoon on my porch." He calls it art. You call the pastor. The pastor calls for prayer. You call your cousin who owns a shotgun. Romance is exhausting. And somehow, still, people fall in love. Somehow, despite all of it, the diseases, the bears, the bureaucracy, the misunderstandings, the fainting, the duels, the legally binding casseroles, people find each other. They look across the barn, lock eyes and think, "Maybe this one won't shoot me." They hear a laugh and think, "That sounds like home." They survive all of it, the absurdity, the horror, the judgment, the hay in the bedsheets, and still want to try. Not because they're naive, but because even out here, in this dusty, broken place where relationships are harder than winter and smell worse, they believe in love, which arguably is the most absurd thing of all. You don't realise it at first. The fatigue creeps in slowly, like fog rolling through a hollow, low and quiet. You wake up one morning and you're not excited, not nervous, not scared, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from the accumulation of trying. Trying to be desirable, respectable, marriageable, forgivable, touchable but not touched, emotional but not dramatic, presentable, containable, small. You've spent months, maybe years, surviving the slow torture of what if. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I'm too bold? What if I'm not enough? What if they choose someone else? What if I choose the wrong person and it ruins me? What if I never feel safe enough to say what I really want? And now the questions don't come. Now there's just silence. You go to the well, past the same 2 girls you've known since childhood. They nod. You nod. No one speaks. You remember once thinking maybe one of them was meant for you. But that thought feels like it belonged to someone else. Someone younger. Someone hopeful. You used to believe love would arrive like weather. Visible, dramatic, impossible to ignore. Now you believe in droughts. You sit at dinner with your family. The conversation turns to land, weather, Fences. Someone says your name, asks if you've thought about settling down. You say, maybe. It doesn't mean anything. You leave early, walk home in the dark. Stars overhead, bright and cold like regret. You remember someone once told you the stars were promises. Now they look like distractions. You don't want drama anymore. You don't want excitement. You want stillness. But even that feels out of reach. Because out here, even quiet costs something. If you're not courting, people think you're failing. If you're not married, people think you're broken. If you're not smiling at someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's expectations, people start offering advice you didn't ask for, prayers you don't want, and opinions you didn't earn. You nod. You thank them. You go home and stare at your ceiling, wondering what part of you is misaligned. Because maybe it's not the world. Maybe it's you. Maybe you were never meant for this place, with its tight rules and shallow smiles and modesty-policed greetings. Maybe you were meant for something else. Something kinder, wider, messier. But you were born here. So you make do. You shrink your dreams. You rewrite your desires to fit the script. You tell yourself it's noble. You pretend to forget. But every so often, the memory returns. The one perfect day. The moment. It's different for everyone. Maybe it was that one barn dance when he spun you a little too close and you laughed before remembering you weren't supposed to. Maybe it was that church picnic when she handed you a plate and your fingers touched and no one noticed, and for 3 seconds the world felt like it had room. Maybe it was just a voice, a look, a possibility. You didn't act on it. You were too scared, too trained, too good. Now that memory lives inside you like a ghost. Not terrifying, just present. You carry it like a letter you never sent. And that's what breaks you. Not the pain, not the heartbreak, the mist, the knowing, the quiet realization that all those rules, those performances, those careful rituals, they weren't for you. They were for everyone else. You were just trying to follow the map, but the map was never made for your heart. It was made for crops and dowries and dinner schedules and sermon outlines. Your heart is an intruder. It wants things the town never taught you how to ask for. And now you're too tired to want. You fake it. You say you're fine. You let people believe you're at peace. You become what they expect. You show up, sit straight, stay quiet. You become their idea of you. And no one notices the cost. Not even you. Until now. Now sitting on your porch at dusk, alone with a cup of tea that's more lukewarm than comforting. You let the silence fill in the cracks. You remember who you were before the effort. Before the dresses, the sermons, the walks, the courtships, the burnt bread, the maybe someday. You remember who you might have been if someone had asked what you actually wanted, and waited for the truth. And you don't cry. Not yet. But your throat tightens. And the stars, those cold, dumb stars, keep shining anyway. Time passes. It always does. And that's the scariest part. Not the heartbreak, not the loneliness, but how easy it is to get used to it. You adapt to the quiet, to the space beside you at dinner that stays empty, to the smiles that don't reach your eyes anymore. You laugh at jokes you've heard 100 times, and no one notices you're faking. You start calling it peace, but peace doesn't hum. This hums, like something low and distant, a memory, a warning, a version of yourself trying to rattle its way back into your bones. But you've changed, or at least you've learned how to sit still while something inside you screams. The town doesn't see it. It sees what it wants. a steady man, a calm woman, a God-fearing, quiet citizen who minds their business, keeps their porch clean, and doesn't ask for more than what's fair. You become a collection of behaviours, a routine. You know when to smile, when to nod, when to bring a pie, when to look away. You know how to survive, but not how to live. Because love, real love, doesn't exist in that space. It can't. It needs risk, vulnerability, confession. And this world taught you to treat all three like sins. So you stopped reaching. You stopped hoping. You stopped writing that letter you never planned to send. And still, people envy you. They call you strong, composed. Someone who's fine on their own. They say, I don't know how you do it. And you say, it's not so hard. But it is. It's exhausting. Not because you're alone, but because you're invisible. You made yourself small enough to survive. Now you don't know how to grow back. You think of the ones who didn't make it. The ones who pushed too hard, loved too loudly, tried to break the rules and paid for it. The girl who ran off with a stable hand and came back 4 years later with different eyes. The boy who confessed his feelings in a letter and was laughed out of the church picnic. The widow who remarried too soon and became a cautionary tale, told between biscuits and judgment. You saw what happened to them, so you stayed safe. You followed the script. And now you lie awake at night and wonder how many people mistake your silence for contentment. You wonder if anyone remembers that you used to write poetry, not for love, but just to feel your own voice on paper. You wonder what happened to the version of you who believed in softness. You haven't felt soft in years. Not really. You felt reliable, useful, acceptable, but not soft. You don't cry anymore. Not because you're strong, but because the tears dried up so slowly you didn't notice they were gone. It takes effort to remember how to be sad, real sadness. The kind that comes with honesty. The kind that isn't immediately followed by, I'm fine. So you distract yourself with chores, with work, with the day-to-day demands of survival. You patch a roof. You feed the chickens. You say things like, maybe next year, and mean probably never. You joke. You laugh. You host dinner. You become what people expect. And at night, when the house is still, and the fire's burned low, and there's no one left to perform for, you sit. Just sit. Not even thinking, really. Just being. In a body that forgot how to ask for more. And that stillness is the scariest part of all. Because there was a time when even your longing was alive. Now it's just a dull ache, like a bruise you keep pressing, just to remember it's still there. Maybe someone once told you that love was dangerous. Maybe they were right. But what they didn't tell you was this, that the absence of love, real love, is its own kind of danger. Not loud, not tragic, just slow, like erosion. One day you look in the mirror and realise you don't recognise your face. Not because it's aged, but because it's emptied. You didn't break. You bled out. One compromise at a time. Eventually you stop waiting. Not because you've moved on. Not because someone else came along, but because something inside you just sat down, like an old dog at dusk. No command, no ceremony. It just folded its limbs and let the day end. You don't check the road anymore. You don't listen for the sound of hooves in the distance, or look out at the hills hoping someone's finally come back to say, it should have been you. That part of you, the waiting part, is gone. You've built a life without it. You keep the house clean. You pay your dues. You're good with animals. You're the kind of person other people rely on when their own hearts fall apart. You're the solid one, the steady one, the one who stayed behind. They say that's noble, but deep down, it's not nobility. It's what was left. You didn't choose it. You inherited it. Because somewhere along the way, someone taught you that your feelings were second tier, that your longings had to be deferred, that there was always someone more deserving, more proper, more likely to be chosen, so you became useful. And useful people rarely get loved. They get needed. They get thanked. But they don't get loved. Not the way you imagined it when you were younger, staring out the window during a thunderstorm, inventing conversations with people who hadn't arrived yet. Back when love was still possible. Back before the expectations calcified into identity. You used to think love was something you had to earn. You thought if you worked hard enough, stayed kind enough, prayed the right way, waited the right amount of time, it would come. It didn't. It never does. Not that way. Because love doesn't reward performance. And performance is all you've ever been taught. Sit right, speak right, don't laugh too loud, don't touch too long, don't want too much, be good. You were good. You were so good. And it left you hollow. No one talks about that. No one talks about how people die long before their bodies stop breathing. You see it everywhere out here. The old woman who smiles through everything but hasn't felt her own heartbeat in 20 years. The man who jokes about dying alone but can't meet your eyes when he says it. The couples who share chores and last names but haven't touched with purpose since the war. Everyone doing what's expected. No one doing what they need. Because what they need is messy. And messy gets punished. So we suffer in silence. We build our lives like fences. Straight, tidy, functional. And then wonder why nothing grows inside them. You've thought about leaving. Once. Maybe more than once. Just walking away. No note. No trail. Going somewhere no one knows your name, where you can speak plainly and feel what you feel, and not have to explain why you're crying over nothing at 3 in the afternoon. But you didn't go. Maybe you should have. But you didn't. Because part of you still believed you could make it work. That if you just stayed long enough, quiet enough, obedient enough, someone would see you. Really see you. Not the version of you who's easy to admire. The version who aches. But they never came. And now you don't expect them to. And that hurts in a way you don't even bother naming anymore. You just keep living. You keep boiling water, folding sheets, watching the sun slide across the walls like a clock no one wound. You write letters you never send. You touch things, spoons, handrails, doorknobs, just to feel something that doesn't pull away. You keep one picture in a drawer. One. Not because it's special, but because it's proof. Proof that once you tried. That once you hoped. And in the rare moments you let yourself admit what was lost, not stolen, not ruined, just missed, you don't cry. You just breathe. You sit on the edge of the bed. You stare at your own hands, these hands that did everything right. And you whisper a truth no one else will hear. I never even got close. Then you stand up and light a candle because it's dark and you still have work to do. The night is quiet now. The wind has settled. The boots are by the door. The porch is still. No more courtships. No more chores. No more questions. Just the sound of the walls breathing with you. If you're still awake, that's okay. You don't need to move, or think, or hope. Just rest. You made it through the Wild West. Through the loneliness, the laughter, the longing, and the things you didn't say. Let it go now. Let it all go. Close your eyes. There's nothing left to earn. Good night.